We do not pay for the light of foreign suns. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the observation deck of the UNS Lex Talionis, her ship a sliver of defiant silver against the void. Beside her, the fleet mine designation, Solon, manifested as a column of shimmering sapphire light, its synthesized voice a low hum in the recycled air. Below them, the planet Kerberos Prime glittered a world of tiered cities and sprawling agricultural domes, now caught in a legal net woven by a species known as the Gilded Host. The host demanded a gratitude tithe, a tax levied on every world they graced with their presence and protection, a protection no one had requested. The stakes were simple and stark: submit to economic vassalage or face a meticulously documented, legally sanctioned blockade that would starve the colony in a single generation. A public inquiry was their only path forward, a desperate gambit against an empire built on the fine print of galactic law. The air on the bridge was thick with the scent of ozone and chilled metal. Lieutenant Commander Jian Li, her face a mask of controlled fury, monitored the tactical display. Host flotilla remains in high anchor, Commander. They're not moving, just watching. Radiating smugness, if I had to guess. Rostova nodded, her gaze fixed on the jewel of Kerberos below. They were a single teaching ship, a vessel designed for precedent-setting action, not sustained warfare. The law was their shield and the truth their only cannon. Solon's light pulsed softly. Their legal filings are procedurally flawless, Commander. The Covenant of Open Skies Section 4 Paragraph Gamma permits the levying of fees for sustained protective patrols in unclaimed systems. Kerberos Prime falls into that category. The AI's logic was a cold, hard barrier. By their own statutes, they have a claim. A claim built on a lie, Rostova countered, her voice low. They arrived 2 cycles ago uninvited. They fired warning shots at a civilian freighter and called it dissuading piracy. Now they demand 1/10 of this world's energy output for the privilege of their shadow. That isn't protection, it's extortion with a better vocabulary. A young ensign barely out of the academy looked up from his communications console. Ma'am, a civilian channel is broadcasting from the surface. It's a family. They're trying to send a message out. Before Rostova could respond, the image flickered onto a secondary screen. A man, his face etched with worry, held a small child who clutched a crudely drawn picture of a starship. He spoke in the simple, direct tongue of a frontier farmer. We were born under this sun, he said, his voice trembling but clear. My grandparents terraformed this soil with their own hands. We don't have much, but it's ours. Please, don't let them take it. The transmission cut out, replaced by the host's gilded sigil. Rostova's jaw tightened. She turned to Solon. They ground the stakes in family and survival. We will answer in kind. Open a channel to the host flagship. Formal hail. I want to speak to the tithe master. The game was set on a board of their choosing, but she would choose the pieces. The tithe master of the Gilded Host appeared on the main view screen, a being encased in ornate golden armor that shimmered even in the flat light of the display. Its voice was a melodic, condescending chime. Commander Rostova of the United Nations ship Lex Talionis, an unexpected pleasure. Have you come to remit the first payment on behalf of the Kerberos Protectorate, Tithe Master? Rostova began, her tone as cold and clear as deep space. We are here to formally contest the legality of your claim under the Aegis Accords, which supersede the Covenant of Open Skies in matters of inhabited worlds. We demand a public inquiry. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto the impassive gold facade. You will state your case not to us, but to a quorum of galactic witnesses. You will justify your gratitude tithe under the full glare of recorded testimony. A silence hung in the void, heavier than any battleship. The tithe-master's helmet tilted a gesture of mild amusement. An inquiry, a bold if foolish maneuver. The cost of convening such a forum is substantial. Should you fail to prove your case, those costs will be added to the Kerberos debt. Are you prepared to gamble with the future of an entire world? The cost of inaction is their servitude, Rostova shot back. We are prepared. Solon file the petition. Cite preemptive economic coercion and fraudulent endangerment. Market priority 1. The entire galaxy will be our jury. Solon's light flared. Petition filed. Quorum protocols initiated. The host has one standard cycle to respond, or they are in default. The ledger of galactic law had accepted a new vicious entry. In the hours that followed, the Lex Talionis became a hub of frantic legal preparation. Rostova Jian and Chief Legal Officer Kenji Tanaka huddled in the briefing room, holographic displays swirling around them. Tanaka, a man whose placid demeanor concealed a mind like a steel trap, tapped a floating document. Their entire case rests on the idea that they established a protective cordon before Kerberos Prime formally petitioned for sovereignty. It's a loophole, a nasty one. They argue they're providing a service the locals are simply too primitive to have requested. Jian slammed a fist on the table. It's a shakedown. How can the quorum not see that? Because the law lieutenant commander is not always about what is right. It is about what is written, Tanaka said softly. Our job is to make the two align. A single sentence could be a key or a cage. Rostova knew they were walking into a room full of cages. Solon's voice filled the room, cutting through the tension. An anomaly has been detected. The host's blockade is not uniform. Energy readings show intermittent high-power emissions directed at the planet's ionosphere. Rostova looked up, her focus sharpening. What kind of emissions? Subharmonic frequencies. Not weaponized, but disruptive. They are subtly interfering with the planet's weather control systems, causing localized droughts in the agricultural sectors. The effect is minor for now, but cumulative. The AI paused. It is engineered hardship, Commander, designed to make the populace more grateful for a potential savior. There it was, the hidden knife. The host wasn't just waiting. They were actively creating the crisis they claimed to be preventing. It was a monstrously elegant cruelty. They were manufacturing the sickness for which they sold the cure. Can you prove it? Rostova asked, her voice dangerously quiet. The emissions are masked, blended with solar radiation. Isolating the signature would require a close-range scan. A direct approach would breach the host's declared exclusion zone and give them legal cause to open fire. A perfect trap, Jian muttered. We can't get the proof without breaking the law, and without the proof we can't win in court. Rostova stared at the tactical map, her mind racing. She saw the host ships arrogant and golden. She saw the struggling colony below. And she saw the path narrow as a razor's edge that lay between them. Kenji, what is the legal precedent for investigative necessity in a public inquiry? Tanaka's eyes lit up with a scholar's fire. It is rarely invoked. It allows for limited, compelled discovery if one can demonstrate a high probability of evidence tampering. But the burden of proof is immense. We would need a preliminary witness. Then we'll find one, Rostova declared. Solon scan all commercial traffic that has passed through this system in the last 2 cycles. Cross-reference it with any registered complaints against the gilded host. We're not the first people they've done this to. I want to find someone who survived them. Some debts are paid in testimony, not gold. The wait for the quorum's assembly felt longer than a lifetime. On the surface of Kerberos Prime, the manufactured drought was taking hold. Another civilian vignette played on a side screen, this one showing a young woman, a hydrologist, pointing at a cracked riverbed that should have been flowing. "The atmospheric moisture content is dropping," she explained to a local reporter, her face grim. "Our models can't explain it. It's like the sky itself is being held for ransom." The simple, desperate plea was a constant reminder of the time they didn't have. Every tick of the clock was another grain of sand falling on the scales of justice, and Rostova felt the weight of every one. Then Solon found a match. A Silosian merchant freighter, the Stardust Drifter, had filed a protest against the host 6 months ago in a neighboring system, citing aggressive negotiations and unsolicited security fees. The case had been dismissed for lack of evidence. The freighter's captain, a grizzled veteran named Kalen, was now docked at a trading post 2 sectors away. He had seen the devil's arithmetic and lived to tell the tale. "Get him," Rostova ordered. "Send a Priority 1 dispatch. Offer him safe passage, legal protection, and full compensation for his time. Tell him he has a chance to see justice done." The message was sent. The response came back faster than expected. "Transponder signal active," the comms ensign reported. "It's him, ma'am. He's on his way, but he says the host knows. They're tailing him." Jian's head snapped up. "A witness under duress. That strengthens our case for investigative necessity, doesn't it?" "Immensely," Tanaka confirmed. "But only if he makes it here." "He will," Rostova said, her voice a low promise. She turned to the tactical display, her mind already calculating vectors and power curves. "Jian, prepare a rescue intercept. Minimal footprint, maximum speed. We're going to meet our witness halfway." The host had written the law. She would use it as a weapon. The inquiry was convened in a neutral space, a virtual chamber projected into the bridge of every participating vessel. An adjudicator from the Galactic Concordiat, a being of pure energy that shimmered like a heat haze, presided over the proceedings. The quorum was a mosaic of faces: stern, Silosians, amorphous Selae, crystalline silicates, and a dozen other species, all patched in from across the quadrant. Their collective judgment would be binding. The Tithe Master stood opposite Rostova's projection, its golden armor seeming to soak up the light in the virtual chamber. The formal proceedings began. "The gilded host," the Tithe Master's voice chimed, "has acted in full accordance with the covenant of open skies. We identified an unclaimed developing world vulnerable to the myriad dangers of this quadrant. We established a protective cordon to ensure its safety. Our gratitude tithe is a modest, reasonable fee for this invaluable service." It spoke of protection while wielding a predator's smile. Rostova stepped forward. "Adjudicator, we contest the very premise of this service. The gilded host did not protect Kerberos Prime. They threatened it. Their arrival was not a gesture of goodwill, but the opening move in a predatory economic siege. We have evidence of a pattern of such behavior, and we have a witness who will attest to it." "A witness?" the Tithe Master scoffed. "A disgruntled merchant with a grievance hardly compelling." "A witness who is at this very moment being pursued by your warships," Rostova countered, letting the accusation hang in the silent chamber. "We petition the court for an order of investigative necessity. We require access to the host's operational logs for this system to corroborate our claim of engineered hardship. We believe they are artificially creating the very crisis they claim to be solving. The truth was a buried seed, and she intended to make it grow." The adjudicator hummed a sound like resonating crystal. "The accusation is grave. The pursuit of your witness is, if true, a profound contempt of this inquiry. Show us this pursuit." On Rostova's command, Solon projected the tactical display into the virtual courtroom. Two gilded host destroyers were clearly visible flanking the tiny freighter Stardust Drifter. The image was stark and undeniable. A gasp rippled through the assembled quorum. The Tithe Master's polished exterior showed no reaction, but Rostova could feel the shift in the room. They had caught their opponent in a lie of omission. The armor of law had its first crack. The destroyers are merely providing an escort ensuring the witness arrives safely. The Tithe Master stated, its voice smooth as oil. Then you will not object to them standing down and allowing my vessel to complete the escort? Rostova challenged instantly. A beat of silence. We will not. The golden warships on the display peeled away their engines, glowing with feigned innocence. The adjudicator's form shimmered more intensely. The petition for investigative necessity is granted. Tithe Master, you will surrender the unredacted operational logs of your flotilla for the past 2 cycles pertaining to all energy emissions directed at Kerberos Prime. Failure to comply will result in an immediate summary judgment. The first victory, small but critical. The host had overplayed its hand, so certain of its impunity that it had forgotten that witnesses have a power all their own. As the data stream from the host flagship began to flow into Solon's core, Rostova watched the Tithe Master. There was no anger, no fear. There was only the cold, patient certainty of an apex predator that believed it had countless other ways to kill. She had won the battle, but the war for justice had only just begun. The Stardust Drifter arrived under the Lex Talionis's protective wing, its hull scarred with the telltale marks of energy burns from warning shots. Its captain, Kalin, was a Xylosian, a species known for their gruff exterior and unyielding memory. He stood on Rostova's bridge, his 4 multifaceted eyes taking in the human crew. They did the same thing to my homeworld. He rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. They showed up, claimed we were in danger, and then saved us from a pirate raid that one of their own ships instigated. The Tithe bankrupted my family's shipping line. Your testimony is crucial, Captain, Tanaka said, offering him a data slate with the legal affirmations. It establishes a pattern of behavior. It gives context to the data we are about to analyze. Solon's light column pulsed with a new urgency. Commander, I have analyzed the host's operational logs. They are heavily encrypted as expected. However, the energy emission logs are a different matter. They have been sanitized. They wiped them. Jian asked, her hope deflating. No, Solon replied. Worse. They've been altered, perfectly seamlessly altered. The subharmonic frequencies are gone, replaced with benign sensor sweep data. There are no gaps, no signs of tampering. According to this ledger, their ships have done nothing but sit and watch. A perfect crime leaves no evidence, only victims. The bridge fell silent. The host hadn't just hidden the murder weapon. They had erased the fact that a murder had ever taken place. Their mastery of data warfare was absolute. They had complied with the adjudicator's order to the letter, delivering a complete, internally consistent, and utterly fraudulent set of records. They were going to win. Rostova felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. They had come so far only to be defeated by a perfectly constructed lie. Before despair could take root, Kalin, the Xylosian captain, spoke again. They think they're clever, he grumbled, his mandibles clicking in irritation. But the gilded host has a weakness. They are arrogant. They believe no one is as meticulous as they are. He tapped a claw on the tactical display. They record everything, every transaction, every threat, every gram of fuel spent. They have to. Their entire legal empire is built on receipts. Rostova looked at him, a new line of inquiry opening in her mind. Receipts. You mean they account for the energy they used? To the last joule, Kalin confirmed. It's a cultural imperative. The golden ledger, they call it. Every expenditure must be justified, logged, and accounted for. It's how a tithe master proves his worth by showing a profit. A plan began to form in Rostova's mind, a desperate, audacious gambit that hinged on the enemy's own obsessive nature. "Solon," she said, her voice sharp with renewed purpose. "Forget the emission logs. I want you to conduct a full energy audit of their flotilla. Cross-reference their stated fuel consumption, life support, and station-keeping energy expenditures against the total energy output of their ship's reactors for the last 2 cycles." The AI paused, processing the request. "Commander, that would be an unprecedented level of computational intrusion. I would have to extrapolate from their reactor signatures. It would be an estimate, not hard data." "I'm not looking for hard data," Rostova said, a thin, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "I'm looking for a discrepancy. The energy for those disruptive beams had to come from somewhere. It wasn't in their official logs, so it can't be in their official expenditure reports. The universe demands balance. Every watt must be accounted for. Show me the missing energy. Show me the ghost in their machine." The public inquiry reconvened. The tithe master radiated an aura of supreme confidence. It had delivered the logs as ordered. The human commander's gambit had failed. It was time to collect the debt. "Adjudicator," the melodic voice began. "The evidence is clear. Our logs are pristine. The accusations of the human vessel are baseless, born of ignorance and envy. We move for a summary judgment in our favor and for the full legal and financial costs of this frivolous inquiry, to be levied against the colony of Kerberos Prime." "One moment, tithe master." Rostova's voice cut through the chamber. Her projection held up a shimmering data slate. "We are not finished. We did not find the evidence we were looking for in your operational logs, because you were too skilled at hiding it there." She paused, letting the statement sink in. "We found it in your accounting." A flicker of something surprise, annoyance ran through the tithe master's posture. "My accounting. That is an internal matter. It has no bearing on this inquiry." "It has every bearing," Rostova countered. "Because your own ledger betrays you. You are so meticulous, so obsessed with recording every asset that you have created a perfect record of your crime." She turned to the adjudicator. "We present a full energy audit of the Gilded Host Flotilla derived from passive sensor readings of their reactor outputs over the last 2 cycles." Solon projected a new set of data into the chamber. It was a simple, stark comparison. On one side, a column of light representing the total energy produced by the host ship's reactors. On the other side, a smaller column showing their officially logged expenditures, propulsion life support sensors, everything they had admitted to. There was a significant gap between the two, a bleeding, undeniable surplus of unaccounted-for energy, a ghost of power that had to have gone somewhere. "Adjudicator!" Rostova pressed on, her voice ringing with certainty. "Over the last 2 cycles, the Gilded Host Flotilla has generated 1.2 terawatts of energy, more than they have officially used or stored. This is not an estimate. This is a calculation based on the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. This energy did not simply vanish." She pointed an accusing finger at the tithe master. "It was used. It was used to power the subharmonic emitters that are even now strangling the life from the world below. It is the energy of your crime, and you have meticulously, arrogantly failed to account for it. Your ledger is unbalanced. You stand in contempt of the universe's oldest law, the conservation of energy." Silence. The chamber was utterly, profoundly silent. The members of the quorum stared at the simple, damning graph. There was no complex legal argument, no convoluted testimony, just a number that didn't add up. The Tithe Master stood motionless, its golden armor suddenly looking less like a symbol of power and more like a sim. It had been defeated not by a loophole in the law, but by the immutable math of the cosmos. They had been weighed, measured, and found wanting. The adjudicator's form glowed with a fierce white light. "Tithe Master of the Gilded Host," its voice boomed, stripped of all its earlier neutrality. "You have presented this court with falsified records. You have prosecuted a claim based on manufactured hardship. You have acted not as a protector, but as a parasite. The charge of preemptive economic coercion is upheld." The victory was sudden, total, and stunning. Cheyenne and Tanaka exchanged a look of disbelief on the Lex Talionis' bridge. On Kerberos Prime, the news flashed across city squares, and a spontaneous cheer went up, a wave of sound that was felt even in orbit. They had won. They had faced an empire of lawyers and defeated it with a high school physics lesson. But Rostova knew it wasn't over. A judgment was not the same as justice. "Adjudicator," she said, her voice steady, "the verdict is welcome. But the matter of restitution remains. The Gilded Host has expended considerable energy in their attempt to subjugate Kerberos Prime. That energy represents a debt that must now be paid." The Tithe Master finally moved its helmet, turning slowly to face Rostova's projection. "Restitution. You have your judgment. Do not overreach human." "The law of reciprocity is clear," Rostova stated, quoting from the most ancient of galactic legal texts. "A cost freely inflicted must be freely returned. We are not asking for punishment. We are asking for the scales to be balanced." She looked to Solon. "Prepare the mirror array. We are going to return what was stolen." Mirror justice was not about revenge. It was about restoration. The Lex Talionis was more than a ship. It was a statement. This fleet, this saint ship, teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Its primary non-lethal weapon system was a marvel of defensive engineering, the mirror array. A series of deployable high-efficiency energy reflectors capable of catching, storing, and redirecting vast amounts of power. It was designed to disarm aggressors by returning their own weapons' fire back at them. But Rostova had a different application in mind. It wouldn't just be their weaponized energy she returned, but their very lifeblood. "Solon," she commanded, her voice echoing on the now silent bridge. "Target the host flotilla's primary power conduits. Not their weapons, not their engines. Target the systems that keep their gilded armor polished and their life support humming. Match the drain to the 1.2 terawatts they expended on Kerberos. We're not taking anything from them. We are simply collecting on their energy debt. With interest." Jian's eyes widened. "Commander, we'll be siphoning their power grid. They'll be helpless." "They will be accountable," Rostova corrected. "They built an empire on the concept of the ledger. It's time they learned what it feels like to be on the wrong side of the balance sheet. The cost of their cruelty would be paid in cold and darkness." The mirror array deployed shimmering panels of impossible physics, unfurling like silver wings around the Lex Talionis. On the main screen, the Gilded Host ships began to flicker. Their brilliant golden hulls dimmed as non-essential systems were automatically shut down to compensate for the massive, unexpected power drain. Lights winked out on their bridges. Their defensive screens sputtered and died. They were being peacefully, legally, and systematically dismantled, not with torpedoes, but with their own squandered energy. The Tithe Master's projection wavered as its own ship's power failed. "This is an act of war," it shrieked, its melodic voice now a discordant screech. "No," Rostova replied calmly. her face illuminated by the glow of the mirror array's control panel. This is an audit. You are experiencing a cost correction. The public ledger of this inquiry will show the transfer, every joule accounted for, every watt returned. The adjudicator's voice filled the space, a final ringing judgment. The actions of the UNS Lex Talionis are legally sanctioned under the reciprocity mandate. The energy debt will be considered paid when the 1.2 terawatt discrepancy is zeroed. The Gilded Host's privileges under the Covenant of Open Skies are hereby suspended pending a full concordiate review. Their method is outlawed. This inquiry is closed. The connection to the court blinked out. The host flotilla was now dark adrift and powerless. They were not destroyed, but they were defeated in a way that was more profound. Their system had been turned against them. Their own obsession with accounting had been the instrument of their downfall. They came to collect a tithe and ended up paying the price. But victory came with its own ledger entry. As the mirror array pulsed a feedback surge, a final spiteful gasp from the host's collapsing power grid struck the Lex Talionis. Alarms blared. "Energy overload on the primary capacitor," Gian yelled. "It's not critical, but the array's focusing lens is cracked. We won't be able to do that again without a full shipyard overhaul." One tangible cost. Another came from Tanaka. "Commander, the legal fight has depleted our discretionary budget for the next fiscal year. We've won justice, but our ability to intervene elsewhere will be limited." A second, more strategic cost. The win was earned, not given. Rostova looked at the darkened ships of the Gilded Host, silent and shamed. She looked at the glittering planet below, now free. The price was worth it. She turned to the comms ensign. "Open a channel to the Kerberos Colony Authority. All frequencies." A new face appeared on the screen, a woman with tears in her eyes and a hopeful smile on her lips. She was the colony's elected leader. "Commander Rostova," she began, her voice thick with emotion. We don't know how to thank you. You have given us back our future." "You owe us no gratitude," Rostova said, her voice firm but warm. "The sun is not for sale. The sky is not for rent. You are free. That is the only payment we require." She paused, then addressed Solon. "Send them the surplus energy we collected. All of it. A gift from one group of stubborn explorers to another." "Consider it a refund," Gian added with a grin. The transfer began, a shimmering lance of pure, clean power flowing from the Lex Talionis to the world below, replenishing their strained reserves. The colony's lights seemed to burn brighter in response. It was more than just energy. It was a message. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about restoring the innocent. The ledger had been balanced. But as the cheers from the planet echoed on the bridge, Solon's light column flickered, drawing Rostova's attention. "Commander," the AI said, its tone uncharacteristically hesitant. "I have detected a new transmission. A Priority 1 communique Concordiat encryption. It is from the Gilded Host's home system." "What is it?" Rostova asked, a sense of unease prickling at her. They had won. The case was closed. "It is a legal filing," Solon replied. "They are not appealing the verdict." The AI's light shifted from sapphire to a deep, ominous crimson. "They have issued a writ of abiding gratitude. They are suing the entire human species for the cost of the lesson we just taught them." The bridge, which had been buzzing with relief and triumph, fell into a stunned, chilling silence. The audacity of it was breathtaking. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance was on a scale they had never imagined. They had defeated a flotilla, but they had only angered the Empire. The gilded host was turning their own victory into a weapon, twisting the concept of mirror justice into a grotesque parody. They were claiming that by being forced to learn a lesson about their own flawed methods, humanity had provided them with a service of immense value, and now they wanted to be paid for it. A new war was about to begin, not in the void, but in the infinite corridors of the law. Rostova stared at the crimson light of the AI, her mind racing to process the sheer malicious genius of the host's countermove. They couldn't challenge the facts, so they were reframing the entire event. It was no longer a legal defeat. It was an educational seminar for which they were now presenting the bill. The cost would be astronomical, levied not against a single colony, but against every human on every world. It was a poison pill designed to make their victory so expensive, so catastrophically costly, that humanity would never dare to interfere with them again. An invoice for enlightenment delivered with a smile. "Can they do that?" Chian whispered, the color draining from her face. Tanaka adjusted his glasses, his calm facade finally cracking. "There is no precedent. It's an entirely novel legal theory. The writ of abiding gratitude is an archaic, almost mythological instrument. It was intended as a way for a saved civilization or to formally honor a savior species in perpetuity. They have twisted it into an instrument of revenge." He looked at Rostova. "They are weaponizing virtue." This was the escalation. Far greater than a simple blockade or a localized legal dispute. This was an attack on the very concept of justice, an attempt to make the act of helping others a financially ruinous proposition. Rostova felt a cold anger settle deep in her bones. The gilded host didn't just want to win. They wanted to salt the earth so that no seed of defiance could ever grow again. They sought to make heroism itself a bankrupt philosophy. Before anyone could speak, another civilian vignette appeared on a monitor, this one from a human news network on Earth. A legal analyst was explaining the writ to a horrified anchor. "If the Concordiate Court accepts the filing," the analyst said, his voice grave, "the gilded host could legally place a lien on the interstellar trade of the entire human species. Every ship, every cargo, every transaction would be tithed until this debt of gratitude is paid. It would be a generational economic enslavement, all perfectly legal, all because one ship and its crew did the right thing." The screen showed images of bustling human cities, of children playing in parks, of starships setting out from orbital docks. All of it was now under threat. All of it was collateral in a legal war they had not asked for but could not afford to lose. The stakes had been raised from 1 world to 200. "So long," Rostova said, her voice cutting through the fear on the bridge. "What are our options?" The AI's crimson light pulsed slowly. "The writ has been accepted for consideration by the Concordiate High Court. We have 1 standard month to prepare a defense. The legal framework is unfavorable. The host will argue that our intervention by forcing them to reevaluate their protection services has saved them from future legal challenges and will increase their long-term profitability. They will quantify this service and present a bill. Our defense must prove that our actions conferred no value upon them. It is a difficult, perhaps impossible negative to prove. So we have to argue that we were trying to harm them," Jian asked incredulously. "How does that look?" "It looks like we are admitting to malice," Tanaka finished grimly, "which would open us up to a different set of charges. It is a perfectly designed legal trap, a Morton's fork on a galactic scale." Rostova walked to the main view screen, staring out at the stars. The Lex Talionis felt very small, very alone. The weight of her species' future was settling on her shoulders. They had fought for justice, and their reward was to be put on trial for the crime of being effective. She thought of the farmer on Kerberos, of the hydrologist, of the grizzled Xylosian captain. Their small victories had triggered an avalanche. A reckoning was coming not of warships, but of words and precedents and clauses. Some battles are fought for territory. This one was for the very definition of right and wrong. "No," Rostova said, turning back to her crew. Her eyes were hard, resolute. "We will not argue that we intended them harm. We will not argue that our lesson had no value." She looked at Solon. "We will argue that the lesson is not yet complete." A flicker of interest in the AI's light. "Please elaborate, Commander." "The host is suing us for the cost of their education." "Fine. Let's give them an education." Her mind was working, connecting disparate pieces of law and philosophy. The writ of abiding gratitude requires the service to be complete, a finished act of salvation. But their rehabilitation is clearly not finished. Their first act after being educated was to file a malicious, predatory lawsuit. That is the act of a recidivist, a criminal who has learned nothing. A teacher's job isn't done until the student truly understands. Tanaka caught on a slow smile spreading across his face. "Commander, you're suggesting we file a countersuit, a motion to delay the writ on the grounds of incomplete service." "Exactly," Rostova confirmed. "We will accept their premise. We are their teachers. But as their teachers, we have a responsibility to see their education through to the end. And they have proven by this very lawsuit that they are still fundamentally morally bankrupt. Therefore, we cannot possibly calculate the value of our service yet, because it has not yet been successfully rendered." It was a brilliant, unexpected pivot. It took the host's absurd legal weapon and turned it into a shield. It accepted their frame and then shattered it from the inside. The greatest legal victories do not break the rules, they expand them. "Solon," Rostova commanded, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. "Draft the motion. Title it, A Petition for Continued Tutelage. We will argue that the gilded host has demonstrated a profound lack of moral comprehension, and as the party that initiated their education, we are legally and ethically obligated to continue it. We will request that the High Court grant us broad authority to oversee their operations, to audit their ledgers, and to impose remedial lessons, until such time as they can demonstrate a genuine understanding of the principles of justice and reciprocity." Jian let out a low whistle. "We're not just defending ourselves. We're petitioning the court to let us become their parole officers, on a species-wide scale." "They wanted to put us in a cage of gratitude," Rostova said. "We will offer to build them a classroom instead. Let's see how the High Court rules when presented with a choice between a greedy plaintiff and a reluctant, duty-bound teacher." She looked at her crew, their faces a mixture of shock, awe, and dawning hope. "The gilded host wanted to make this about money. We will make it about character. And in a contest of character, I like our odds." The battlefield had changed from a single system to the very heart of galactic law, and humanity was now on the offensive. The petition was filed before the echoes of triumph had fully faded from the bridge. Solon, with cold, logical precision, translated Rostova's audacious concept into the formal, stilted language of Concordiate law. The document, titled A Petition for Continued Tutelage, was dispatched to the High Court on Ethel, the ancient hub of galactic jurisprudence. It was a single, defiant packet of data against an empire's legal wrath, a whisper against a coming storm. On the bridge of the Lex Talionis, the crew held a collective breath, suspended between a victory they had barely savored and a new conflict that threatened to consume everything. The universe seldom rewards a good deed unpunished. Jian Li stared at the tactical display where the darkened host flotilla was being towed away by Concordiate marshals. "A parole officer," she murmured, shaking her head in disbelief. "We went from being defendants to offering to be their parole officer." "Commander, forgive my saying so, but that's either the most brilliant legal maneuver in history or we've just formally declared our own insanity." "The line between the two is often just the outcome," Rostova replied, her gaze distant. "They wanted to trap us in their language, their framework of costs and payments. Our only way out was to accept the frame and then break the wall behind it." "But the High Court," Tanaka began pacing the small briefing room. "They are beings of immense age and tradition. They value precedent above all else. A move this unorthodox, it could be seen as contemptuous. They could dismiss it out of hand and grant the host's writ by default." His worry was the anchor that kept their desperate hope from floating away. The High Court was not the ad hoc inquiry they had just won. It was the final arbiter, a court of galactic myth and legend, where entire species had their fates decided. They were no longer fighting in a back alley. They had kicked down the door of the cathedral. On Earth, the news of the writ had already struck. The initial euphoria over Kerberos Prime's liberation curdled into widespread panic. Markets trembled. A talking head on a news feed projected onto a side monitor gestured frantically at a spiraling graph. "The potential liability is incalculable," the analyst exclaimed. "The gilded host could claim a percentage of our entire species' GDP for centuries. This isn't a lawsuit. It's a carefully worded declaration of eternal economic warfare." The broadcast showed a family watching the report from their living room, their faces etched with a fear that was now shared by billions. The victory on Kerberos felt a galaxy away. The price of one world's freedom might be everyone else's chains. The summons came. The Concordiate High Court would hear both the host's writ and humanity's petition, not in a virtual chamber, but in person. The Lex Talionis, its mirror array still fractured, was ordered to proceed to Ethel with all due speed. The cost of the journey alone would further strain their already depleted resources. Justice Rostova reflected was a ferociously expensive commodity. Ethel was a world of impossible architecture, a planet-sized courthouse where the air itself seemed to hum with the weight of 10,000 years of judgments. Towers of living crystal scraped an indigo sky, and the light of a white dwarf sun was filtered through vast orbital lenses, casting everything in a sober, judicial glow. The Lex Talionis was dwarfed by the docking scaffolds, a small, functional human ship amidst the glorious vessels of the galaxy's elder races. The High Court chamber was a colossal amphitheater carved from a single piece of obsidian. At its center sat the triumvirate, the three supreme adjudicators. One was a silicate, a mountain of shifting crystal whose thoughts manifested as chimes of pure light, Sasum. Another was the last of the Seaful matriarchs, a being of immense telepathic and empathic power, floating in a containment field of shimmering mist. The third was a Xylosian ancient and unmoving, his multifaceted eyes having witnessed the rise and fall of empires. They were the law made manifest. A single thought from them could unmake a species. A new representative from the gilded host stood opposite them. This was no tithe master in ostentatious armor. This was a being who called itself the Prime Accountant. It was sleek, dressed in robes of simple, terrifyingly expensive gray silk, its face obscured by a polished silver mask that reflected the chamber back on itself. It radiated an aura of quiet, absolute confidence that was far more intimidating than the tithe master's arrogance. When it spoke, its voice was not melodic, but flat, logical, and precise, the voice of a machine calculating a final, inescapable sum. Esteemed adjudicators, the prime accountant began, its voice filling the immense space. The facts are not in dispute. The race known as humanity, through its agent, the vessel Lex Talionis, intervened in a standard host revenue operation. This intervention, while disruptive, forced upon us a valuable lesson in operational security and public relations. It has prompted an internal review that will increase the efficiency and profitability of all future host endeavors by an estimated 12%. It paused, letting the number sink in. They provided a service, a profound, species-altering consultancy. The writ of abiding gratitude is the only legal instrument sufficient to quantify the immense value of this unsolicited gift. We have sent them the invoice. We expect it to be paid. The argument was clean, clinical, and monstrous. It stripped the event of all morality, reducing justice to a mere transaction on a corporate ledger. They had committed a crime, been caught, and were now charging a consulting fee for the experience. Then it was Rostova's turn. She stepped forward, flanked by Tanaka, her simple blue uniform a stark contrast to the chamber's grandeur. She felt the gaze of the triumvirate, a physical pressure that seemed to test her very soul. She would not be intimidated. Adjudicators, she began, her voice clear and steady. The gilded host speaks of value, of profit, of a lesson learned. We are here to argue that they have in fact learned nothing at all. She gestured to the prime accountant. Their argument is Exhibit A. A species that had truly absorbed a lesson about justice would not immediately seek to pervert that lesson into a tool of revenge and extortion. A student who has truly learned does not send his teacher a bill for the ink used in his textbook. They have demonstrated with this very writ that they are not reformed. They are merely fining their methods of predation. The silicate adjudicator chimed a sound like falling glass. The petition for continued tutelage is an unprecedented request. It borders on a demand for custodianship of another sovereign species. Justify this. This was the crux. Rostova had to prove they weren't just trying to seize power. We do not seek to rule them, she stated firmly. We seek to hold them to their own stated principles. The gilded host built their empire on the sanctity of the ledger, on the idea that all debts must be paid, that all actions must be accounted for. They believe in the law of the balance sheet. We simply ask that this law be applied to them, not just by them. She turned to Solon, who had manifested a simple, elegant data column beside her. We propose the creation of a mirror ledger, a public concordiate-supervised record of the host's activities. It will not control them, but it will watch them. It will account for their deeds, good and ill. When and only when that ledger shows a sustained period of ethical conduct, of reciprocity, not predation, can their education be considered complete. The mirror does not judge, it only reflects. The prime accountant stirred. An interesting fantasy. But the law deals in facts, not aspirations. The fact is, a service was rendered. A debt exists. And this talk of ledgers is a distraction. Unless the humans can prove their lesson conferred no value, their obligation stands. It had them. It was a perfect legal checkmate. Proving a negative was impossible. On the contrary, Rostova said, playing her final card, we can prove that their philosophy, the very foundation of their golden ledger, for which they claim we provided a valuable update, is itself a fraudulent asset. The lesson we provided cannot have conferred value because the entity it was conferred upon is built upon a theft. A ripple of shock went through the chamber. The prime accountant's silver mask betrayed nothing, but Rostova sensed a change in its posture. The Xylosian adjudicator leaned forward a fraction of an inch. Explain this accusation, now. Solon, Rostova commanded. Present your findings. The AI's data column shifted, projecting a series of ancient texts and star charts into the center of the room. The Gilded Host's legal and financial system, the Golden Ledger, is revered by them as their own unique creation, the bedrock of their civilization for the last 3 millennia. Solon explained, its voice resonating with factual certainty. However, a deep-core archival search has revealed this to be false. 3,050 years ago, the host made first contact with a species known as the Fenrim. The Fenrim were master accountants and archivists, a peaceful species whose culture was based on a philosophy of universal balance, a public, transparent ledger of all actions and their consequences. The projection showed images of the Fenrim, graceful, four-limbed creatures, and fragments of their beautiful, mathematically precise language. The Gilded Host spent 50 years in contact with the Fenrim. They learned their language, studied their philosophy, and admired their systems. Then the Fenrim disappeared. All records of them were erased. The Gilded Host claimed their system had been struck by a stellar flare. But our analysis of the star's history shows no such event. There is, however, a 50-year gap in the host's own publicly available energy ledgers, a period of immense, unaccounted-for expenditure. Solon paused. The Gilded Host did not invent the Golden Ledger. They stole it. They took the Fenrim's philosophy of transparency and weaponized it, turning a tool for mutual understanding into a bludgeon for conquest. They exterminated a species and claimed their greatest cultural achievement as their own. Their entire civilization is built on a foundational, unacknowledged, and unpaid debt. The chamber was tomb-silent. The accusation was monstrous, unthinkable. It didn't just challenge the lawsuit. It challenged the Gilded Host's very right to exist as a legitimate galactic power. They did not just break the law. They were forged from a broken law. The prime accountant stood motionless for a long time. When it finally spoke, its voice was like chipping ice. A fantasy. A desperate slander concocted from myth and statistical noise. You have no proof. Don't we? Rostova countered softly. You are the masters of the ledger. Your most sacred law is that every expenditure must be justified, every debt recorded. Show us the ledger for those 50 years. Show us the accounting for the energy it took to observe the Fenrim. If it was a peaceful exchange, the records should be pristine. She took a step forward. Open your books. Or does the law of the ledger only apply to others? She had them. She had turned their own system, their own obsession, their own stated philosophy against them in the most fundamental way possible. They could not produce the records because they would prove the genocide. They could not deny the record's existence without violating their own core principles. Their legal trap had snapped shut on their own leg. It was then that the prime accountant played its last desperate card. The escalation came not as a shout, but as a calm, venomous statement. The humans speak of past sins as if they are without their own. Perhaps this court would be interested in the unredacted logs of humanity's first expansionist era. The records of the Proxima Betelgeuse incident, for example. The one your own histories refer to as the Great Regret. A colony accidentally wiped out by an atmospheric processor misfire. We have the data that proves it was no accident. Shall we balance ledgers, Commander Rostova? Shall we speak of hypocrisy? Gian, watching from the Lex Talionis, swore under her breath. Tanaka paled. It was a brutal, effective blow. The Great Regret was a deep scar on the human psyche, a moment from their past they had worked for centuries to atone for. But Rostova did not flinch. She did not deny it. She met the unwavering gaze of the adjudicators. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Let us speak of it. We are not proud of that moment. We were young, arrogant, and foolish. We made a terrible mistake, and a world paid the price." She took a deep breath. "And what did we do? We didn't hide it. We didn't erase the Fenrim of our history. We named it the Great Regret. We teach it to every child in every classroom. We built monuments to the memory of those we wronged. And we created an entire class of vessel, the teaching ships, including the Lex Talionis, whose sole purpose is to ensure that we never, ever make that mistake again." She turned her eyes burning into the prime accountant's silver mask. "You use your past as a blueprint for new crimes. We use our past as a lesson to be better. That is the difference between us. That is the service we are trying to offer you. The chance to learn. The chance to regret. The scars of history are either a warning or a map." Humanity had chosen to read the warning. The Cephal matriarch, silent until now, projected a single thought into every mind in the chamber. It was not a word, but a feeling, a profound, soul-shaking sense of sorrow followed by a wave of clear, cold respect. The silicate adjudicator began to chime, its light flashing with the speed of a final calculation. The Xylosian elder rapped a single clawed finger on the obsidian dais, the sound cracking like the breaking of a world. The triumvirate had reached its decision. The Xylosian spoke its voice, the rustle of ancient leaves. "The gilded host's writ of abiding gratitude is a perversion of legal principle. It is denied." The words fell like hammer blows. "The human petition for continued tutelage, while unorthodox, has merit. The evidence of foundational hypocrisy is compelling. The evidence of recidivist intent is plain." The adjudicator looked down at the prime accountant. "You have built your house upon stolen ground. You have forgotten the first principle of any ledger, that it must be honest. Your education is indeed incomplete." The court's judgment was swift and absolute. A Concordiate Oversight Committee was to be formed to investigate the fate of the Fenrim. The gilded host's sovereign privileges were hereby placed in probationary trust. And most stunningly, the mirror ledger, as proposed by Commander Rostova, would be instituted. Humanity was appointed as its first curator. They had not just won. They had fundamentally reshaped the legal landscape of the galaxy. The prime accountant did not speak. Its silver mask simply tilted down a gesture of profound final defeat. Its entire civilization, built on the unassailable power of its legal system, had been dismantled by an appeal to the very spirit of the laws they had stolen. The cost of this victory was immediate. Rostova received her new orders before she even left the High Court chamber. She was promoted to fleet captain and immediately reassigned. Her new permanent post was on Ethel as humanity's chief representative on the Gilded Host Oversight Committee. She would never command a starship again. Tanaka was assigned to her staff, his brilliant legal mind now shackled to a mountain of bureaucracy. Gian was given command of the Lex Talionis, her first mission to begin a decades-long tedious patrol of the host's borders, monitoring them for compliance. They had won the war, and their reward was a lifetime of paperwork and vigilance. Justice was not a parade. It was a long, quiet, thankless job. Back on the Lex Talionis for the last time, Rostova stood on the observation deck, watching the celestial mechanics of Ethel. Solon shimmered beside her. On the main screen, a new galactic channel had just been activated. It was the mirror ledger, a public, permanent, and unalterable record. Its first entry blinked in stark, simple text, subject, the Gilded Host. Course Remedial Ethics 101. An introduction to reciprocity. Status initiated. The light from the public ledger entry blinked on the screen, a single hopeful pulse in the darkness. Confirmed. Rostova looked at that word at the future it represented. She had traded her ship, her sky for this, for a single line of text on a universal ledger. Justice is never a final verdict. It is not a weapon or a victory or a reward. It is a process, a commitment. It is the slow, patient, and unending work of teaching a stubborn universe how to be better than it was yesterday, one ledger entry at a time. And the first lesson is always the hardest. You must be willing to pay the price for the lessons you teach. We are all accountable to the light of every sun.